The Intergalactic Union of Species Central Space Station, Harmony 1, hung in the void like a gleaming jewel, its vast, spiraling structure housing representatives from over 1,000 sentient species. At the heart of this cosmic metropolis sat the High Court, where the fates of entire civilizations could be decided with the bang of a gavel. Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Terran Confederation stood before the towering doors of the High Court, her heart racing, but her face a mask of calm. Behind her, a small team of human aides shuffled nervously, each carrying stacks of documents and data pads. They knew what was at stake, the future of humanity itself. As the doors swung open, revealing a vast chamber filled with delegates from across the galaxy, Sarah steeled herself for the performance of a lifetime. At the center, on an elevated dais, sat High Justice Zixnara of the Quilshian people, a being that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a sequoia tree. "This special session of the High Court is now in session," Zixnara's voice boomed. "Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Terran Confederation, you stand before this court to submit your people's unconditional surrender to the Mahakt Empire. How do you plead?" Sarah stepped forward, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, an expression that sent ripples of unease through the alien delegates. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm and measured, "I'm afraid there's been a slight misunderstanding." She gestured to her aides, who began arranging a massive stack of documents on the table before her. "I'm here to submit these for the Union's records." What followed was a masterclass in legal maneuvering and human audacity. Sarah presented a ludicrously short inventory of the Terran Confederation's holdings: 8 pencils, 6 chairs, and a malfunctioning coffee maker named Gerald. As the court erupted in confusion, she unveiled the true nature of her plan. "You see," Sarah explained to the stunned assembly, "the Terran Confederation, as you knew it, has been reduced to a single listening post on the fringes of known space. Every other human ship, station, and colony has declared itself a sovereign entity." The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Mahak delegation, a group of sleek reptilian beings, hissed in fury as they realized their carefully laid plans for conquest were crumbling before their eyes. But Sarah wasn't finished. Invoking an obscure piece of Union law, she presented evidence of this massive political restructuring. A data chip that, unbeknownst to the court, contained nothing but an ancient human meme known as a rickroll. As the High Justice sputtered in disbelief, Sarah delivered her coup de grace. "If you wish to deal with humanity," she declared, "you'll need to negotiate with each captain, governor, and administrator individually. That's several thousand independent negotiations, by our last count." The chamber descended into chaos, with delegates shouting accusations of trickery and deceit. It was at this moment that High Justice Zexnara, his exoskeleton now a deep, pulsating red, made a crucial mistake. "Preposterous," he bellowed. "This makes you nothing more than a collection of pirates and rogues." A ripple of excitement passed through the human delegation. They had been waiting for this moment. Sarah's grin widened as she reached for a large, ornate trunk that had been sitting unobtrusively by her side. "I was hoping you'd say that, Your Honor," she said, her voice filled with barely contained glee. "Because if we're pirates, then we have some very specific rights under galactic law." What followed was a scene that would be recounted in dive bars and grand opera houses for centuries to come. Sarah Chen, respected diplomat and ambassador, transformed before the eyes of the galactic community into the very image of an ancient Earth pirate. Donning a tricorn hat, an eye patch, and a long coat with gleaming silver buttons, she drew forth a curved cutlass and raised it high. "I invoke the Pirate's Code, as recognized by Union Law 3992Z, Sarah's voice rang out. "And as per the code, I demand trial by combat to settle this dispute." The High Court erupted into utter pandemonium. Delegates leapt from their seats, some cheering, others jeering, while a few simply fainted from the shock. The Mahak delegation was in an uproar, their tails lashing furiously as they shouted accusations of trickery and deceit. As the madness unfolded, Sarah caught her chief of staff's eye and gave a subtle nod. Throughout the massive space station, red alert klaxons began to blare. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie crimson glow as confused bureaucrats and diplomats rushed to and fro. Oh, and one more thing, Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the din. She stood at the chamber's main exit, cutlass in hand, and a wicked grin on her face. You might want to check on your life support systems. It seems they've been commandeered. With a flourish of her coat, Sarah disappeared into the corridor, her team close behind. The last thing the stunned court heard was the fading echo of her laughter, punctuated by the pounding of boots as security forces finally responded to the alarm. In the days that followed, the galaxy learned that humanity had not only outwitted the Intergalactic Union and the Mahakt Empire, but had also managed to slice off a significant chunk of Union space for themselves. The newly formed Free Human Territories became a haven for those seeking adventure, opportunity, and freedom from bureaucratic oppression. Stations and outposts that had once been under Union control found themselves transformed overnight into bustling free ports. Ships bearing the new flag of the Human Sovereign Alliance, a field of stars surrounding a Jolly Roger, began to appear in systems across the galaxy, engaging in trade, exploration, and the occasional act of creative interpretation of interstellar law. Sarah Chen, now known across the stars as the Corsair Diplomat, found herself at the center of a storm she had helped create. From the bridge of her flagship, the Loophole, she coordinated the efforts of the newly formed Human Sovereign Alliance. Each day brought new challenges, from negotiating trade deals with former enemies to mediating disputes between newly independent human colonies. The Mahakt Empire, faced with the prospect of trying to conquer thousands of sovereign human vessels, found themselves in a quandary. Their mighty fleets, accustomed to facing organized resistance, were ill-equipped to deal with the guerrilla tactics and unpredictable nature of the human pirates. More than one Mahakt admiral was driven to the brink of madness, trying to coordinate attacks against targets that seemed to vanish and reappear at will. Meanwhile, the Intergalactic Union was thrown into disarray. The human maneuver had exposed countless loopholes and contradictions in Union law, leading to a flood of petitions from other species seeking to exploit similar avenues for independence. The once mighty bureaucracy found itself drowning in paperwork, appeals, and constitutional crises. As news of the humans' audacious gambit spread, it sparked a wave of change across the stars. Press species took inspiration from humanity's example, leading to a cascade of rebellions and declarations of independence. The rigid structure of the Intergalactic Union began to crumble, replaced by a more fluid, dynamic interstellar community. One particularly tense situation arose at New Providence Station, formerly a quiet Union research outpost that had become one of the busiest free ports in the sector almost overnight. Its administrator, Yuki Tanaka, found herself juggling a Mahakt trade delegation, suspected of being spies, demanding Quilshian merchants, and a group of Zikthari refugees seeking asylum. Sarah's solution was characteristically bold. Invite the Mahakt delegation to a grand tour of the station, she advised. Show them everything. Our policy is radical transparency. They can't spy on what we're openly showing them. As for the Quilshians, Sarah invoked the new Corsair Code, declaring that attempting to monopolize trade was an act of piracy itself, punishable by having to walk the space plank. The Zikthari refugees presented a more complex problem, but Sarah saw an opportunity. Offer them citizenship in the Human Sovereign Alliance, she suggested. We need skilled workers, and they need a home. It's a win-win. This pattern repeated itself across human space. Each crisis was met with a mixture of ingenuity, audacity, and a liberal interpretation of galactic law. The humans' reputation grew, not just as cunning adversaries, but as unpredictable allies who could turn a hopeless situation into an advantage with nothing more than quick wits and a willingness to bend the rules. Even as the Mahakt Empire and the remnants of the Intergalactic Union plotted to bring the upstart humans to heel, they found themselves constantly outmaneuvered. Human ships would appear out of nowhere to raid Mahakt supply lines, only to vanish into uncharted space before retaliation could be mounted. Union enforcement vessels would arrive at human stations to find them operating in strict accordance with the law, albeit laws so creatively interpreted that they barely resembled their original intent. As months turned into years, the galaxy settled into a new normal. The Human Sovereign Alliance, once dismissed as a collection of rogues and misfits, became a major power in its own right. Their territory, officially known as the Free Human Territories but colloquially referred to as the Pirate Kingdoms, was a patchwork of independent worlds, stations, and ships, all united by a common love of freedom and a healthy disrespect for authority. Sarah Chen, the architect of this new human civilization, found herself elevated to an almost mythical status. Songs were sung of her exploits in 100 languages across 1,000 worlds. She was the Corsair diplomat, the woman who had outwitted the greatest legal minds in the galaxy and turned an entire species into space pirates with nothing more than a stack of papers and a brilliant mind. But even as she basked in the success of her grand plan, Sarah knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The galaxy was changing, and humanity would need to change with it if they hoped to survive and thrive in this new cosmic order. As she stood on the observation deck of the loophole, watching the swirling colors of a nebula that had yet to be named, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. It would be one hell of an adventure. The galaxy held its breath, wondering what these curious, clever apes would do next. Whatever it was, one thing was certain: it would be anything but boring. The age of the cosmic corsairs had begun, and the universe would never be the same.